Cast your mind back to your formative tween years. Did you maybe have a poster of your fave teen heartthrob on your wall? Did you maybe dabble in a little bit of fan fiction? Maybe you secretly thought that if you could just meet your celebrity crush, they would fall in love with you? My name is Allegra, and I've made it my mission to understand how we get sucked into fandoms. I believe that the media that we consumed as children plays a huge part in our lives. So, every other week, we revisit one huge cultural phenomena from our formative years. Come listen to Stan on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
There are a lot of podcasts out there.
But there aren't a lot of podcasts that talk to chicken influencers.
There's a chicken for every occasion, actually.
Or that write catchy songs about particle physics.
It may seem like a hoax, but it's only quantum chromodynamics, folks.
In fact, there's only one show that does all of that, and it's our show, Part-Time Genius.
So if you love discovering new things in delightfully surprising ways, join us, Will and Mango, every week on Part-Time Genius, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, listeners. Host Grace Anna here. A quick note before the episode begins. For the simplicity of the episode, I will be referring to Sada Yacco by her birth name, Sada. When she became a geisha, many did refer to her as her geisha name, Yakko. Then when she came to the West, she was called Sada Yacco. To avoid confusion, I have made the decision to continue to refer to Sada as Sada over the course of the episode. With that, let's dive in to ArtMuse's two-part episode on the famed geisha-turned-actress, Sada Yacco.
What is art without the muse? Many of Western art's most famous works are depictions of women. But who were these women? Do they have their own stories to share with the world? Hello and welcome to ArtMuse, a podcast that aims to reshape the ways in which we interpret well-known works of art by paying dues to the women whose images have been immortalized, but whose names and stories have been wrongfully overlooked. While these women's faces are familiar to viewers around the world, their identities have been largely forgotten. Together we will explore the important lives and legacy of the female muse and appreciate these works of art from a new perspective, through the eyes of the women whose image stares back at us. Is the muse in actuality just as, if not more, important than the artists themselves? And I'm your host, Grace Anna.
When she first arrived in Paris at the turn of the 20th century, she sent the entire city abuzz with excitement. Appearing like an apparition from a fantastical dream, she introduced Western audiences to Japanese theater and culture, eventually becoming Japan's first international female celebrity. Picasso immortalized her on paper, Alfredo Muller printed her on poster, and Guerlain released a perfume inspired by her. Though her time abroad was short, she dazzled the entire Western world and left an indelible impression everywhere she went. When she eventually returned to Japan, she sought to open new avenues of opportunity for Japanese women, founding the country's first school for female actresses. Over the course of her fruitful career, she transcended cultural boundaries, challenged societal norms, and captured the heart of both the East and West. Listeners, today I introduce you to the Japanese geisha, actress, dancer, and fashion icon, Sada Yacco. Sada was born on July 18, 1871 in Edo, modern-day Tokyo, into an affluent family. But unfortunately, when she was just 4 years old, her father faced financial hardship, and Sada was sent to a geisha house to work as a maid. When her father died a few years later, Sada was officially adopted by the proprietress of the house and began training to become a geisha. The proprietress quickly realized that Sada was a particularly special girl. Exceptionally beautiful and with a unique fiery spirit, Sada had the potential to become the city's next greatest geisha. And after a few years of meticulous training, Sada was ready to make her debut. it didn't take long for Sada to become the most sought-after geisha in all of Tokyo. Soon the city's most powerful men became her loyal customers. In fact, she became so popular that she was deflowered by Japan's Prime Minister, Ito Hirobumi. By the age of 15, Sada had become one of Japan's most celebrated geishas in modern history. A few years later, at the pinnacle of Sada's career as a geisha, she was introduced to the rising kabuki star Kawakami Otojiro. Though Sada had some of the country's most important men at her beck and call, she was immediately drawn to the unconventional and unruly actor. Actors at the time were seen as outcasts and had an even lower social standing than geishas. So when Sada, the most sought-after geisha in the country, began a relationship with a lowly kabuki actor, it sparked an uproar. But Sada did not falter in the face of societal scorn. She had fallen in love with Kawakami's spunky spirit and committed to him wholeheartedly. They were officially married in October of 1893. Once married, Sada left behind her career as a geisha and poured herself into supporting Kawakami's work. Because women at the time were forbidden from the stage, Sada worked behind the scenes, funding his projects and managing his finances and logistics. Unfortunately, Kawakami's career did not take off in the way he and Sada had hoped, and within just a few years, the couple found themselves in significant financial debt. Desperate for a fresh start, Sada and Kawakami began dreaming of traveling west. And in the spring of 1899, they made the radical and reckless decision to travel to San Francisco with their own acting troupe. When Sada arrived in America, she not only experienced culture shock, but was surprised to see that it was her face on the cover of all of the troupe's promotion. Though she had never before performed on stage and had come to America primarily to support her husband's career, she soon found herself being advertised as the troupe's star. Unlike in Japan, where women were prohibited from the stage, the West embraced and celebrated female actresses, and women like Sarah Bernhardt and Ellen Terry had achieved international fame. And not only was America ready for a new female star, but Sada happened to arrive at the height of Orientalism, a time when Western artists and writers were fascinated with Eastern culture. In fact, the French art critic Philippe Berti even coined the term Japonisme to describe the widespread craze for Japanese art, fashion, and design. Sada was at the right place at the right time, and she was destined to be a sensation. But though fate was certainly on her side, Sada's success was largely due to her natural talent as a performer. Despite having no formal training, Sada began captivating audiences all over the country, from San Francisco to Chicago to New York. And after a successful American tour, the troupe embarked on a transatlantic journey to Europe. Spending a few weeks in London, they went on to Paris, where Sada was invited to perform with the avant-garde dancer Louis Fuller at the 1900 Exposition. Sada was an instant hit with both the public and press. As Louis Fuller later recalled, "I never saw anything like the way those critics went wild with enthusiasm." Sada went on to perform all over the city to roaring crowds. Audiences were in awe of her dramatic performances, especially impressed with how realistic her death scenes were. And Sada was not only a popular actress, but soon became a fashion icon as well, inspiring designs at many high-brand stores. The famed perfumery Guerlain even named a scent after her. She was on the cover of top fashion magazines and the face of a number of advertisements. Sada's performances also attracted many of the city's rising artists, who captured her likeness across the mediums. Both Pablo Picasso and Alfredo Muller made custom posters of Sada, and she was sketched by Leonetto Cappiello, Ramon Casas, and William Nicholson, among many other artists. By the end of her time in Paris, she had infiltrated nearly every facet of society, from the theater world to the fashion world to the art world. Sada Yacco's name was on everybody's lips. When Sada eventually settled back in Japan in 1902, she introduced Western-style theater to Japanese audiences, starring in many of these productions, despite Japan's stigma against women on the stage. Wanting to improve conditions for aspiring actresses, Sada also opened Japan's first formal drama school for women, training women in acting, dancing, and scriptwriting. Many of her students went on to have successful careers in the theater. In 1904, Sada and Kawakami also opened the country's first children's theater, which offered free tickets to students. When Kawakami died in 1911, Sada took charge of their theater group and continued to star in and produce her own productions over the next 3 years, until she finally retired in 1914. In her later years, Sada opened her own silk and textile production company, called the Kawakami Silk Company. With no formal children of her own, she also adopted a daughter and son in her late age. Unfortunately, Sada lived long enough to see the Second World War, and was a first-hand witness to the devastating effects the war had on her home country. She died just a year after the war's end on December 7, 1946, of liver cancer. She was 75 years old. Though she was once an international icon with worldwide recognition, her name and immense legacy have faded from history, and she has since largely fallen into obscurity. So in today's episode, we aim to honor Sada as the outstanding woman she was, and explore the following questions. In the words of author Leslie Downer, who was this mysterious, seductive being who appeared like a shooting star, bedazzling America and Europe for a few brief years? Westerners in thrall of her exoticism and beauty, and absorbed in their own preconceptions of what Japanese women were, had no idea of the real person behind the stage persona. The world she came from was more different than anything they could ever imagine. We know what the West thought of her, but what did she think of the West? Where did she come from? How did she achieve her brilliant success? Who was the real woman behind the painted mask? So without further ado, let's dive in to the remarkable life story of Sada Yacco. Sada Koyama was born on July 18, 1871, in Edo, later known as Tokyo. Her mother, Otaka Koguma, was from a well-respected samurai family who were at the center of life and business in Edo. For generations, Otaka's family had run the Ichizenya, a prominent bookstore and currency exchange shop. Otaka was a particularly beautiful and refined woman, who, because of her prominent upbringing, had a sophisticated air about her. Sada's father, Hisajiro Koyama, was a kind and peaceful man, so much so that he was nicknamed Buddha. We do not know exactly how Otaka and Hisajiro first met, but they married in 1853, and Hisajiro subsequently took over the family business. Sada was the youngest of 12 children Otaka and Hisajiro went on to have. As the baby of the family, she was often affectionately referred to as Ko-Sada, meaning Little Sada. For the first few years of her life, Sada enjoyed a comfortable childhood. As she later recalled, "My grandfather on my mother's side was an assistant magistrate and rather famous. Our house was in Nihonbashi, right where the Bank of Japan is now. We had a perfectly prosperous life." When she was 3 years old, the family moved to an even nicer neighborhood, where her father set up a pawn shop for additional income. A naturally musically inclined child, Sada was given lessons in both music and dance, which she excelled in. But unfortunately, when Sada was 4 years old, her father began to face severe financial hardship due to increasing taxes and inflation. Not before long, his businesses were on the verge of bankruptcy. As a result, Sada was sent to a geisha house to work as a maid, despite her alarmingly young age. As author Leslie Downer explained, it was a form of indentured servitude in exchange for money that her father borrowed from the house, in exchange for Sada. How did Sada feel to be ripped from her childhood home and sent to work in a strange new place? Was she terrified to leave her parents' side, or did she feel that her parents had betrayed her? As author Leslie Downer continued, no doubt the little girl shed bitter tears, sent away from her mother and family at such a tender and impressionable age. But of course there was nothing she could do or nothing she could say. She was part of a culture where one took the worst life had to throw at one and bore it in silence. And unfortunately, the family's hardships were only going to get worse. When Sada's father unexpectedly died a few years later, her mother was left in complete destitute. Unable to support her 12 children, her mother asked the proprietress of the geisha house to officially adopt Sada. This not only meant that Sada would have a new guardian, but she would also now be expected to train as a geisha. The word geisha translates to artsperson. Geisha were primarily entertainers who hosted lavish tea parties, dancing and singing for their guests. Their tea houses attracted some of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the country, and if a geisha were to become a favorite of one of these men, he might become her patron. The most popular geisha were like modern-day movie stars and became household names. As the proprietress began training Sada, she quickly saw something special in the young girl. With exceptional beauty and a rambunctious spirit, Sada had limitless potential for success. Over time, the proprietress began to believe that Sada, with the right training, could become the greatest geisha Japan had ever seen. We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers.
Cast your mind back to your formative tween years. Did you maybe have a poster of your fave teen heartthrob on your wall? Did you maybe dabble in a little bit of fan fiction? Maybe you secretly thought that if you could just meet your celebrity crush, they would fall in love with you? My name is Allegra, and I've made it my mission to understand how we get sucked into fandoms. I believe that the media that we consumed as children plays a huge part in our lives. So, every other week, we revisit one huge cultural phenomena from our formative years. Come listen to Stan on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
There are a lot of podcasts out there.
But there aren't a lot of podcasts that talk to chicken influencers.
There's a chicken for every occasion, actually.
Or that write catchy songs about particle physics.
It may seem like a hoax, but it's only quantum chromodynamics, folks.
In fact, there's only one show that does all of that, and it's our show, Part-Time Genius.
So if you love discovering new things in delightfully surprising ways, join us, Will and Mango, every week on Part-Time Genius, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. Most children taken into geisha houses were expected to do laborious tasks, like scrubbing floors and cleaning bed sheets. But because the proprietress took a special liking to Sada, she treated Sada like a daughter. As Sada later explained, "When I was taken into the Hamada house, it was as a daughter. Even though I was a geisha, I was different from ordinary geisha. I was brought up very strictly, as if I were her own child." As part of Sada's training, the proprietress sent Sada to geisha masters, who taught her the delicate art of being a geisha, from ballroom etiquette to specialized makeup to how to perform the tea ceremony. She was taught how to attract a man with just one tantalizing glance, and how to engage in flirtatious behavior. She also studied various musical instruments, like the shamisen, which many geisha played, and she was taught how to put together elaborate flower arrangements. But Sada's favorite lessons were her dance lessons. Sada absolutely loved to dance and showed an immense amount of talent from an early age. As dancing was an essential part of being a geisha, Sada received extensive training. Born with natural grace and poise, she excelled in her lessons, often so enthusiastic about what she had just learned that she ran home to show the proprietress. Through dance, Sada learned how to tell stories with movement and gesture alone, a skill that would later serve Sada throughout her career as a performer. Sada was also sent off to a Shinto priest who taught Sada how to read and write with a calligraphy brush. This was a somewhat revolutionary decision on the part of the proprietress, as most women at the time were not educated. In fact, the first women's school had opened in Japan just a few years before in 1870. Though her training was exhausting at times, Sada's hard work paid off. By the time Sada was 9 years old, she began attending banquets as a sake pourer. And by the age of 12, she was officially given the geisha name Koyako, or Little Yacco, named after one of the most famous geisha in Japan. But despite her rigorous schedule, Sada was a spirited girl, with a wild and rebellious nature. As Sada later remembered, "I was an uncontrollable tomboy. I wore boys' kimonos and straw sandals just like a boy. Every day I ran off, I climbed trees, played tag, jumped around and played with the boys. I carried on playing with the boys whenever I had the chance, and messed about, and didn't really concentrate on learning the geisha arts." In her off time, Sada took secret lessons in the Japanese martial art judo, as well as learned to play billiards. She also began riding horses, and by the time she was an early teen, she became a skillful horsewoman. In fact, she even participated in professional races as a teenager. As Liam Hess wrote, "Instinctively ambitious, Sada was part of a new generation of Japanese women who undertook a full education and also participated in the masculine pastimes of horse riding and billiards." And it was through horse riding that Sada met her first true love. Momosuke Iwasaki was a young and handsome student who happened to be walking by when Sada was out on a horse ride. Though Sada was a skilled rider, her horse suddenly began bucking wildly, and she soon lost full control of her reins. When Sada began screaming for help, Momosuke rushed to the rescue, helping Sada calm her horse and safely get down. Her heart pounding with fear, Sada did not at first notice just how handsome the man who came to her rescue was. But when she finally looked up into his dark, mysterious eyes, she began to feel butterflies in the pit of her stomach. What she didn't know at the time was that Momosuke was equally taken with her. In fact, he had never before seen such a beautiful and spirited young woman, and his heart fluttered with infatuation. It was a meeting straight out of a fairy tale, and Sada was sure that she had just found her Prince Charming. The next day, Sada went to Keio University with some red bean jam cakes and her best smile to find her gallant rescuer and thank him for saving her. As author Leslie Downer described, Sada offered him the cakes and apologized prettily, with an irresistible mixture of little girl bashfulness and artless coquettishness. She had been so flustered, she said that she had failed to thank him properly for saving her. Strolling the streets below the campus, the two began to tell each other their stories. "My family lost their money," she prattled, "so I had to become a geisha." Momosuke confided that he really wanted to be a poet, but he had to give up on that dream and think of a more practical career. He had to make money to support his family. Though their initial attraction may have been superficial, Sada and Momosuke soon found that they had much in common and began to bond on a deep emotional level. Sada continued to visit Momosuke at the university, and he in return visited her at the tea house, where she was now working as a geisha. It didn't take long for Sada and Momosuke to fall head over heels for one another. Sada loved Momosuke's vivaciousness, especially compared to the middle-aged men she was often surrounded by at the tea house. And Momosuke greatly admired Sada's bold and fiery spirit. But most of all, they provided a safe space for one another to confide in, sharing their innermost feelings. They particularly bonded over their lack of autonomy over their own lives. Sada knew that she was destined to be a famous geisha and at the whim of the proprietress, and Momosuke had to answer to his father, who was expecting him to support his family. As author Leslie Downer continued, they chattered about childish things, her classes, his studies, their hopes and dreams. They sang, they danced, they laughed. They did not care what they did so long as they could be together. It became harder and harder to be apart. At first, they did not understand what was happening. They burned with the ardor of a new and unknown passion. But whenever they became aware of the sober reality, they remembered that their relationship could not last. Their lives were not their own. The best they could hope for was that when many years had passed, when they were no longer the property of others, but could control their destinies, their paths might cross again. Another glaring obstacle the young couple faced was Sada's inevitable deflowering. By the age of 14, Sada was already gaining attention amongst Tokyo as one of the most promising rising geishas. She had grown into a ravishingly beautiful young woman, with brown, sparkling eyes and an irresistible smile, and her good looks did not go unnoticed. Wealthy patrons soon began requesting her at their parties, watching her with growing interest. As a contemporary of her time described, Sada had a certain refinement which came from her samurai parents. She also had an innocence that was rare in the geisha world. She was straightforward and focused. She learned all that from her adopted mother, and with her support, by the age of 14, was one of the most famous geisha in the city. And as one of the most sought-after geisha, Sada's virginity became more and more invaluable. As Sada came of age, the proprietress began to contemplate who might perform Sada's deflowering. It was an important decision with life-changing consequences, and one that the proprietress would need to make wisely. As author Leslie Downer explained, as the proprietress was considering who would deflower Sada, she knew that Sada was alluring enough to entice someone of the highest prominence, who could also help support her towards her future. The chances that her deflowerer would continue to be her patron, providing her with financial support and a network of connections, were high. Offering Sada's virginity to the right person could set Sada up for a lifetime of wealth and comfort, even if it came at the sacrifice of having to give her body to someone else. And so the proprietress decided to aim high and approach the most powerful man in the country, the Prime Minister Ito Hirobumi. Ito had recently been appointed as Japan's first prime minister after the fall of the Tokugawa shogunate. A known lover of geisha, Ito had been eyeing Sada for a while and had taken a liking to her. In fact, he had begun to specifically request Sada at his parties, charmed by her childlike innocence and rambunctious personality. He had even invited Sada to visit him at his summer villa, an invitation reserved for only his favorite geisha. And so, when the proprietress approached Ito with the opportunity to deflower Sada, he excitedly accepted. Negotiations soon after began, with the expectation that Ito would take Sada under his wing and provide a comfortable life for her. A few weeks later, on one sweltering afternoon at his summer villa, Prime Minister Ito took Sada's virginity. She was only 16 years old. As author Leslie Downer explained, Sada would have known that she would have to undergo an essential and maybe painful rite of passage in order to attain the status of adult geisha. Ito was a kind man and probably prepared her for it. The proprietress had certainly tutored Sada in the proper procedures. On the day, she would have bathed and put on her makeup with extra care. The evening would have begun with conversation, sake, and dancing. Then the two would have retired to a small tatami-matted room. How did Sada feel as Ito led her into his bedroom? Was she filled with fear over what was about to transpire? Did she think of her love Momosuke longingly? Or did she shake with anger, infuriated that she had no agency over her own body? However Sada felt on the day of her deflowering, she did soon after become the Prime Minister's favorite geisha, a privilege that came with many perks. He showered Sada with lavish gifts, including her own personal rickshaw, which she proudly rode around the city. And he gave Sada ample spending money, which she used on expensive clothing and makeup. It didn't take long for rumors of Sada's relationship with the Prime Minister to spread like wildfire, and she quickly became the most famous geisha in all of Tokyo. In fact, she became so popular that she was known as a 5-minute geisha because she was in such high demand that she could only make 5-minute appearances at parties and events. As her popularity soared, Sada reached near celebrity status, and her name was on everybody's lips. But though Sada's career as a geisha had skyrocketed, she still longed for her first true love, Momosuke. Because she was now famous around Tokyo, it became harder and harder for Sada and Momosuke to meet. At times, Sada would even wear a disguise, hiding her face with a shawl, to be able to see her beloved. But as time went on, Sada had an aching feeling in her heart that their love would not be able to withstand the demands of her newfound fame. As author Leslie Downer described, no doubt, once Ito had initiated her into the arts of love, she shared her newfound knowledge with the handsome young man. But both of them knew all too well that their love was doomed. In those days, no one in Japan imagined for a moment that they would marry for love. It was certainly nothing to do with marriage, which was arranged by one's elders and betters. They knew they would part, but neither of them guessed how dramatic and final that parting would be. It was around this time that Momosuke was approached by one of the most prominent men in the country, Yukichi Fukuyama, with a marriage proposal. Fukuyama was looking for a husband for his youngest daughter and was impressed with Momosuke's intellect and drive. As part of the marriage contract, Momosuke would be able to take on the renowned Fukuyama name, live in their palatial family estate, take over the family business, and inherit the family's fortune when Fukuyama passed away. He also agreed to fund Momosuke's studies abroad, offering to pay for Momosuke to study in America for a few years before formally marrying his daughter. As much as Momosuke adored Sada with his entire heart, he knew Fukuyama's offer was too good to turn down. And so, in December of 1887, he agreed to the terms of the proposal and signed the marriage contract. It was official. The love of Sada's life would marry somebody else. As author Leslie Downer eloquently described, one icy January day, Sada met her handsome boy for the last time. She shed not a tear. No matter what she felt, she was determined that he should never know. We are destined to lead separate lives, she told him. But let's each of us do our best to be successful. You on your path, I on mine. A few days later, he boarded a steamship and sailed for New York. She could not even go to the quay to wave him off. She must have endured the most terrible, gut-wrenching pain, loss, and emptiness. Her life had become hollow. Everything had lost its color and meaning and become utterly pointless. The horror of it was that she could not say a word to anyone. She had to weep alone in secret. In public, she had to be cheerful, flirting with old men for whom she cared nothing. She had to keep her tears, sorrow, and anguish to herself. Perhaps something in her heart turned to ice. She would get on with her life. She would concentrate on her work and perfect her dancing. After all, she was a star, one of the most popular and famous geisha in the city. She had plenty of admirers, even if she did not love them. There would be no more love. What Sada did not know at the time was that this would not be the end of her and Momosuke's love story. In what would feel like a lifetime later, they would eventually reunite and finally be able to spend their lives together. We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers.
Cast your mind back to your formative tween years. Did you maybe have a poster of your fave teen heartthrob on your wall? Did you maybe dabble in a little bit of fan fiction? Maybe you secretly thought that if you could just meet your celebrity crush, they would fall in love with you? My name is Allegra, and I've made it my mission to understand how we get sucked into fandoms. I believe that the media that we consumed as children plays a huge part in our lives. So, every other week, we revisit one huge cultural phenomena from our formative years. Come listen to Stan on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
There are a lot of podcasts out there.
But there aren't a lot of podcasts that talk to chicken influencers.
There's a chicken for every occasion, actually.
Or that write catchy songs about particle physics.
It may seem like a hoax, but it's only quantum chromodynamics, folks.
In fact, there's only one show that does all of that, and it's our show, Part-Time Genius.
So if you love discovering new things in delightfully surprising ways, join us, Will and Mango, every week on Part-Time Genius, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Ever wonder why scam calls feel so specific? Why they somehow already know your name, your city, or even your address? It's usually because of data brokers. These companies collect your personal information from across the internet and sell it online, usually without you even realizing it. Things like your phone number, home address, family members, and even places you've lived. And once your information is out there, it spreads fast. That's where Aura comes in. Aura automatically finds your personal information on data broker sites and submits removal requests for you. Then Aura keeps monitoring to help make sure your information stays gone. You can even see where your data was found and removed. And Aura goes beyond data removal. You also get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and up to $5 million in identity theft insurance. Right now, you can try Aura free at aura.com/hidden. That's aura.com/hidden.
Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. After Sada said goodbye to Momosuke, she focused her energy on her career, wanting to elevate her fame to even greater heights. She deepened her relationship with the Prime Minister, who continued to shower her with money and gifts. He often took Sada with him to his house on the coast, and even taught Sada how to swim. As a contemporary of Sada described, Sada had chosen the best possible patron. Her face was as beautiful as a peony, blossoming next to a sleeping lion. She was a butterfly playing with a lion's mane. In the flower and willow world, she was number one. She was the most unusual geisha, very high collar. Despite her aching heart, Sada's career as a geisha could not have been going any better. She had the country's most powerful man as her lover and patron. As a result, was able to enjoy special luxuries and privileges, and was the most sought-after geisha in Tokyo. It was also around this time that Sada first began to dabble in acting. As a celebrity geisha, Sada was invited to perform in various kabuki plays at tea houses across Tokyo. This in and of itself was another privilege, as women had been banned from the stage for centuries up until just a few years prior, when the Tokugawa shogunate lost power. As a leading geisha, Sada was invited to perform both kabuki dances and plays at the city's top tea houses, at times even playing male kabuki characters. As Sada later recalled, "I always liked playing men. Whenever someone didn't want to play the man's part, I took it. Old men, villains, I did them all. I was good at fighting scenes. I was a real tomboy in those days. Though Sada had no real ambitions to become an actress, she enjoyed experimenting with movement and expression to tell different stories. Little did she know, she would later use these skills to become Japan's most celebrated actress and an international star. Sada spent the next few years performing around the city, her popularity only growing over time. But in 1889, Prime Minister Ito began to lose romantic interest in Sada and put an end to their relationship. He did, however, vow to continue to act as Sada's guardian and advisor, and would remain on good terms with her for the rest of his life. As the most sought-after geisha in Tokyo, it didn't take long for Sada to find new patrons. Over the next many months, Sada enjoyed a number of different affairs, each with their own perks. She became involved with the president of the second Yokohama Bank, who was so enamored with Sada that he bought her own house. She also struck up relations with the politician Narahara Shigeru, who showered Sada with lavish gifts. And rumors began to spread that she took on many lovers on the side as well, including a famed sumo wrestler. But as time went on, Sada knew that she needed to start looking for a husband. Marriage would come at the cost of her career, as she could not continue being a geisha once married, but it would offer her long-term financial stability. And she would soon be swept off her feet by the unlikeliest of men, who instead of stability would offer Sada the adventure of a lifetime. Kawakami Otojiro was a rising kabuki star whose lively and experimental acting troupe was making a splash throughout Japan. So when Kawakami came to perform in Tokyo, the entire city was buzzing with excitement. Sada was first introduced to Kawakami through Prime Minister Ito, who invited Kawakami to give a private performance at his villa. But when he showed up, Kawakami refused to perform, declaring, "If you want to see my performance, come to the theater and pay for a ticket." A man of the people, Kawakami would not give out special privileges, even to the most powerful man in the country. Sada was greatly impressed with Kawakami's gutsy act of defiance, and Kawakami was equally drawn to her as well. He even awkwardly lingered at the villa just so that he could introduce himself to her. They met again a few weeks later, when Kawakami and his friends went out with a group of geishas, including Sada. Though Kawakami was not traditionally good-looking, Sada was attracted to his exuberant confidence. As Leslie Downer described, he had a cheeky round face, thick eyebrows, a blunt nose, and a defiant set to his mouth. He looked like an overgrown street urchin spoiling for a fight. But his cocky self-confidence, combined with a certain self-deprecatingly comical style, was irresistible. Sada and Kawakami spent that night together, the start of their whirlwind of a romance. It didn't take long for Sada to become completely smitten with Kawakami. As a friend of Sada wrote, Sada saw his power and realized what a strong man he was. She fell totally in love with him. She thought, "I'd like to be with someone this powerful for the rest of my life." Soon the two became inseparable, and the press couldn't get enough of Tokyo's hottest celebrity couple. As a newspaper of the time reported, Kawakami staged a real-life love scene with Miss Yacco. For her part, she thought he was different from the big-spending, flashy kind of patron she usually hangs around with. He was a real man, greatly different from the other men who were weak. So she called him to her side and would not let go. Kawakami couldn't leave her either. But though Kawakami was a kabuki star, actors were still considered to be lower class. In fact, actors were even lower than geisha in terms of social standing. Despite his success, Kawakami barely had a penny to his name, nor did he come from a respected family. So the public did soon begin to wonder what Sada, who was once the mistress to the country's prime minister, was doing involving herself with a lowly actor. As the playwright Shigure Hasegawa pondered, Kawakami was not a great man. I thought Sada a much greater person because even though she was a geisha, she had her own rickshaw. I wondered why a woman like her would get together with a man like him. Their relationship subsequently began to face widespread public backlash, and Sada was often taunted at the tea houses. But Sada was a woman of pride. Her heart was set on marrying Kawakami, and this time she would take her destiny into her own hands. She not only continued her relationship with Kawakami, but also financially supported him, sharing her income from her work as a geisha with him. By the end of the year, Sada and Kawakami decided to get married. As Sada later explained, "When I got together with Kawakami, I was a geisha. Some might think it was a typical geisha actor affair and that we just hitched up for convenience. But it was absolutely not like that. I was pretty eccentric myself and really liked bohemian types. I also thought Kawakami would not be an actor all his life. Considering my social position, even if I wanted to marry into a decent family, I knew they wouldn't have me. I decided I'd like to marry a real maverick. If Kawakami was kind enough to want to marry me, I said I would accept. So it was settled." Sada and Kawakami were officially married in October of 1893. In a surviving wedding portrait, we see Sada seated with her hands clasped in her lap, while Kawakami stands proudly beside her. As author Leslie Downer described, Sada looks softly pretty in a fashionably pastel-colored, unpatterned kimono. She sits while he stands protectively at her side. Her skin is like porcelain, her huge dark eyes as extraordinary as ever. She looks submissive, pensive, and quietly satisfied, as if she is looking forward to a placid but happy life in the shadow of her man. Once married, Sada had to leave her days as a geisha behind. Instead, she settled into her new role as Kawakami's wife and focused her efforts on supporting her husband and his career. As author Leslie Downer continued, for Sada, the first thing was her husband, and the second thing was her husband. She had given up her geisha status at the pinnacle of her career to devote herself to him. Fortunately, Kawakami's career was flourishing. His popularity as an actor only grew over time. His shows were in such high demand that eager theatergoers queued up for days to see him perform. And he even gave a special performance for the emperor. With his career at an all-time high, Kawakami began to have dreams of opening up his own theater. Sada rallied behind him, using her connections as a former geisha to borrow enough money to fund the theater. The theater officially opened in June of 1896. On opening night, Sada stood proudly next to her husband on stage as he welcomed their first audience. This was a small but defiant move, as most wives would not dare to share the spotlight with their husband. As author Leslie Downer explained, to the audience's amazement, there was Sada, standing demurely on the stage next to her husband. What could this mean? Why had she stepped from the shadows in this way when wives were expected to stay home? Glancing around, Sada picked out many familiar faces. Her patrons from the tea house days were all there. Sada knew that the theater would not have been possible without her, and she was proud of their shared success. And one day, Sada would do more than just stand next to her husband on stage. Though she didn't know it at the time, she would soon be stealing his spotlight.
We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers.
Cast your mind back to your formative tween years. Did you maybe have a poster of your fave teen heartthrob on your wall? Did you maybe dabble in a little bit of fan fiction? Maybe you secretly thought that if you could just meet your celebrity crush, they would fall in love with you? My name is Allegra, and I've made it my mission to understand how we get sucked into fandoms. I believe that the media that we consumed as children plays a huge part in our lives. So, every other week, we revisit one huge cultural phenomena from our formative years. Come listen to Stan on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
There are a lot of podcasts out there.
But there aren't a lot of podcasts that talk to chicken influencers.
There's a chicken for every occasion, actually.
Or that write catchy songs about particle physics.
It may seem like a hoax, but it's only quantum chromodynamics, folks.
In fact, there's only one show that does all of that, and it's our show, Part-Time Genius.
So if you love discovering new things in delightfully surprising ways, join us, Will and Mango, every week on Part-Time Genius, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. Unfortunately, despite the theater's success, Kawakami soon found himself drowning in debt. The money the theater raised made only a small dent in the loans Kawakami and Sada had to take out to open the theater, and creditors were soon at their tails. Feeling like there was no way out, Kawakami unexpectedly announced that he was running for Congress in 1897. As the faithful wife she was, Sada once again rallied behind Kawakami, despite how ludicrous his plan might have been. Sada joined Kawakami on the campaign trail, once again using her connections to gain him funding and support. Perhaps unsurprisingly, when the results came in March of 1898, Kawakami lost by a significant margin. His foolhardy plan to fix their financial issues by running for parliament only landed them in deeper debt, as he had to borrow more money to fund his campaign. As Sada later lamented, Kawakami was a really reckless man. He wouldn't listen to anyone. I married him when I was 22, and I intended to spend my life peacefully and quietly taking care of him, as his devoted wife. But in 1898, he unexpectedly ran for parliament and lost. That was the beginning of our unfortunate fate. Both Sada and Kawakami fell into a deep depression after the election. They were now in dire financial straits and had no one to turn to for help. But one night on a late walk around the harbor, Kawakami was hit with an epiphany. He saw a small boat with a for sale sign and looked at Sada enticingly. Kawakami bought the boat a few days later. He began to have dreams of sailing to the west, where he was convinced he'd have more success than in Japan. It may have been another one of Kawakami's wild ideas, but Sada figured they had nothing left to lose. As she later described, Kawakami bought the boat, named it Nippon Maru, and decided he was going to sail off to some far country. So I said I would go with him. Over the next few weeks, Kawakami and Sada began to put their plan into action. They decided to make their way by boat from Tokyo to Kobe, where they could then sail west. To prepare, they gathered maps and compasses to direct them and purchased a loud horn as an alarm. As author Leslie Downer explained, Sada had no need to participate in such a desperate mission. As a famous geisha, she could make a very good living by herself. It was she who supported him, not vice versa. She did not need to share in his disgrace. Japanese did not do things in couples. It was very eccentric and a modern choice to accompany her man. She had decided that their fates were inextricably bound. Thus, a plan was hatched to begin a new life. Go off to a new land somewhere, anywhere, and start afresh. It was the last throw of the dice. They had nothing to lose. Sada and Kawakami took off that September. For the next 3 months, they voyaged in their tiny boat along Japan's coast. Kawakami took charge of the sail, while Sada manned the rudder. Their journey was relatively smooth until one day they were unexpectedly caught in a typhoon. Suddenly, waves as big as buildings began crashing over them. and their boat nearly capsized. Fortunately, Sada and Kawakami were able to make it to a nearby harbor, where they docked and took shelter for a few days. After narrowly escaping disaster, Sada and Kawakami began docking in seaside towns more frequently, putting on makeshift performances in exchange for room and board. But that winter, the journey would only become more difficult. They did not pack clothing thick enough to keep them warm against the cold sea air, and were often chilled to the bone. They also had to fight frequent winter storms, some so intense that they were convinced that they would not make it out alive. On one occasion, they were even attacked by a pool of seals. When they finally reached Kobe that January, Sada and Kawakami were on the verge of collapse. In fact, Kawakami was even taken to the hospital, where he was treated for anemia. As author Leslie Downer described, "It had been a strange and not entirely comprehensible interlude. At least Kawakami and Sada had escaped their creditors. Traveling like vagabonds, they had freed themselves from the constraints of society. They had learnt that they had talent and performance skills to survive wherever they went. They had also discovered each other's strengths and weaknesses. Sada had shown she was far from just a little woman. She was a powerful asset. Kawakami was not the kind of man to overlook something like that. They had left their old life behind. It was time for a new start. The only question was what to do next." Fortunately, it was shortly after arriving in Kobe that Kawakami's dreams to travel west were finally realized. It was around this time that Kawakami was introduced to Yumindo Kushibiki, a wealthy businessman who invited Kawakami and a troupe of actors to perform in America, offering to cover all costs. The troupe would arrive in San Francisco and slowly make their way east to Atlantic City. Once again, Sada rallied behind her husband. Together, they gathered a troupe of 16 actors and finalized their travel arrangements. In preparation, Sada practiced walking in a Western style, no longer keeping her head bowed. And though she was joining with the intention of supporting her husband, she did practice a few performances, on the off chance she might have to appear on stage. And so, on April 30th, 1899, Sada, Kawakami, and their burly troupe of actors set sail for America. How did Sada feel as the steamship left the shores of Japan towards foreign land? Was she excited by the adventures that lay ahead, or was she overcome with fear? Would this be yet another disaster, or would she and Kawakami finally catch their lucky break? Could she have imagined that on the other side lay fame and fortune beyond her wildest dreams? The journey to America was not an easy one. Because they could only afford the cheapest tickets, the troupe was confined to the lower deck, which was dim, damp, and moldy. These conditions were breeding grounds for lice and disease. In fact, the ship was even quarantined in Nagasaki when a passenger on board fell ill with the bubonic plague. Fortunately, after a grueling 3-week journey, the troupe safely arrived in San Francisco that May. Stepping off the steamship onto foreign land, Sada could barely believe her eyes. As she later recalled, "It was the first time I had ever been abroad. I was completely beside myself with wonder. I felt as if I were in some mythical country, or up above the clouds. I wouldn't believe I was in the same world. There were railways crisscrossing above and below the steam engines and cable cars and automobiles and horse carriages passing by. So all the time you heard clank, clank. We held hands and pulled each other across, saying, 'Don't get separated, okay?' But Sada was barely able to settle her emotions down before she experienced another huge shock. As she looked up at the billboard announcing their show, she saw her own face staring back at her. As author Leslie Downer explained, the biggest surprise for Sada had come as they were walking through the city. There was her own face, blown up to mammoth proportions, made into posters and plastered all over the streets. There she was in her black kimono, her hair drawn into a chignon, her lovely features impassive, gazing demurely into the distance with her extraordinary eyes. "What on earth was going on?" she asked the manager. "In these foreign countries, you have to have an actress," he said. Sada was flabbergasted. She had rehearsed just in case and had been told she might have to act, but she was certainly not expecting to find herself definitively on the stage, let alone see her own modest face being used to publicize the troupe. Though Sada had come to support her husband, she now unexpectedly found herself being promoted as the troupe's main star. This was largely due to the West's gravitation towards female celebrities. Actresses like Sarah Bernhardt, Eleonora Duse, and Ellen Terry had become household names across the Western world and were celebrated as icons of their age. If the troupe were to be successful in America, they would need a strong female leader, and Sada was the perfect woman for the job. As author Leslie Downer continued, for Sada it was a revelation. It was not just that the buildings were strange and the traffic frightening. This was a society where women could be publicly worshipped like goddesses and play a more important part, at least on stage, than men. For a Japanese woman, that was almost impossible to even imagine. Sada also traveled to America at a time when fascination with Eastern cultures was at an all-time high. In fact, the term Japonisme had recently been coined to describe the West's obsession with Japanese art, design, and fashion. Sada's arrival was fortuitously timed, coinciding with the peak of the West's preoccupation with Japanese culture. To Americans, Sada looked like a fairy tale character, right out of the fantasies that they had heard about this foreign land. Newspaper articles began popping up all over San Francisco, announcing the arrival of Japan's leading geisha. As author Leslie Downer continued, Sada arrived in the West at the perfect moment. For all the fascination with geisha, no one except those who had been posted to Japan had ever had the chance to see one. To Americans, this beautiful creature in her exotic garb was the very essence of the mysterious East. The stage was set for her to enjoy in unprecedented triumph. Here for the first time was a real geisha. Not just that, but the most cherished geisha in Japan, who at the age of 28 had launched herself into a new career to become Japan's first actress. It was as if Sada's destiny had been written in the stars, and soon she would be shining as the brightest star of them all. And so, Sada had no choice but to get on stage and start performing with the troupe. How did Sada feel as she took her first few steps onto the stage? Was she filled with nerves and anticipation? Or did performing come naturally to her? Was she ready for her big moment? For these first performances, the troupe put on traditional kabuki. These shows were grueling for both the cast and audience, with performances lasting over 8 hours. Because San Francisco had a large Japanese community, these performances were mainly attended by Japanese expatriates. The community enjoyed the troupe's performances so much that their shows quickly sold out. By that June, the troupe had become so popular that they were invited to perform at the California Theater, San Francisco's biggest theater. To prepare, the troupe shortened their productions to make them more palatable to American audiences. And much to their delight, their shows were a massive hit with the public. But it was Sada who stole the show. As one glowing review read, "Miss Yacco shows herself a very clever woman. There seemed to be a new poetry given to the Japanese in her performances, and her face as well as her acting had intellect in it." And as another critic declared, "Madame Yacco is more than a geisha. She is a far more intellectual type, and her work has in it brains and invention. I have seen this kind of dragon representation, but never with such evidence of pure artistic meaning as when Madame Yacco did it the other night." Though Sada had no formal training as an actress, nor did she ever set her sights upon the stage. Her debut in America had been an extraordinary success. As author Leslie Downer explained, her dancing lessons since the age of 4, her years as a geisha, which was a form of acting in itself, her appearances on the stage and charity performances had all paid off. She was the entrancing Yacco, the most celebrated geisha in Japan, adored by prime ministers, sumo heroes, and kabuki stars. She could bewitch anyone, even a theater full of Westerners who could not understand a word she said. It didn't take long for Sada to become a local celebrity. She could be found glitzing around town in her kimono, dining at the city's best restaurants, and staying at the most expensive hotels. We can only imagine the whirlwind of emotions that Sada was feeling over her newfound fame, from shock to glee to exhilaration. But unfortunately, despite their immense success, the troupe soon found themselves in a precarious financial situation. The man funding their tour could no longer afford to pay their growing expenses. Barely able to soak in their accomplishments, the troupe now suddenly struggled to pay their bills. In fact, things got so severe that on some days they could hardly afford food. Fortunately, the troupe was taken in by the Japanese expat community, who offered them temporary shelter. But as time went on, it became harder and harder for the troupe to survive. Many of the members pleaded with Sada and Kawakami to return to Japan, at least until they could secure more financial backing. But Kawakami refused to give up. They had had their first taste of success in the West, and he was hungry for more. As he later recalled, "I couldn't bear the idea of going home showing the white flag." So instead, that September, the troupe decided to leave San Francisco and travel north, first to Seattle and then to Portland. From there, they would turn east, hoping to find success in Chicago. It was a long and arduous journey. Because they were low in funds, the troupe could only afford train tickets for long distances, often walking within cities, their bags of costumes and props balanced on their back. They finally arrived in Chicago that October, exhausted of all energy and resources. They knew they would need to make it in Chicago to survive. They had already come this far, and there was no turning back now. How did Sada feel as she entered the windy city? Was she overcome with uncertainty? Did she second-guess their decision to stay in America? Or was she confident that they would succeed? What Sada could not have known as she trudged her way into Chicago was that soon she would take the city by storm and become a sensation unlike anything America had ever before seen. Though the road ahead would be challenging, there was fame and fortune beyond her wildest imagination, just within reach. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of ArtMuse's episode on Sada Yacco. We will finish Sada's story and honor her immense legacy in part 2 of this episode. I have included images, resources, and suggestions for further reading on the ArtMuse website and Instagram. ArtMuse is produced by Kula Production Company. Today's episode was written by me, your host, Grace Anna. Stay tuned as I continue to share the stories of the women pictured in famous works of art. Until next time, bye for now.
Cast your mind back to your formative tween years. Did you maybe have a poster of your fave teen heartthrob on your wall? Did you maybe dabble in a little bit of fan fiction? Maybe you secretly thought that if you could just meet your celebrity crush, they would fall in love with you? My name is Allegra, and I've made it my mission to understand how we get sucked into fandoms. I believe that the media that we consumed as children plays a huge part in our lives. So, every other week, we revisit one huge cultural phenomena from our formative years. Come listen to Stan on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
There are a lot of podcasts out there.
But there aren't a lot of podcasts that talk to chicken influencers.
There's a chicken for every occasion, actually.
Or that write catchy songs about particle physics.
It may seem like a hoax, but it's only quantum chromodynamics, folks.
In fact, there's only one show that does all of that, and it's our show, Part-Time Genius.
So if you love discovering new things in delightfully surprising ways, join us, Will and Mango, every week on Part-Time Genius, available wherever you get your podcasts.